I'm Laura Desmond. I'm the curator and educator here at the Frederick Remington Art Museum, and you are in the last of our 9-part webinar series exploring the life and work of American sculptor Sally James Farnham. The previous installments of the series are available on the museum's website, frederickremington.org. It's been just over a year since the Remington Museum opened its new permanent exhibit dedicated to this important 20th century artist. And it's an exhibit that was made possible by a generous gift from the Robert F. and Eleonora W. McCabe Foundation. And since he is here, I'm really delighted to extend the deepest thanks to Michael Reed, the researcher behind the Farnham Catalog Resonate project, and who's just been unstintingly generous with his time and knowledge and expertise when I was curating the Farnham exhibit and also in putting together these webinars. So huge thank you to Michael Reed.
Hello.
So Farnham is probably most famous for her large dynamic monuments. Okay, here we've got Carolyn Worth coming in. And for her intimate expressive portraits. But today's webinar considers works that are not tied to specific sites in the manner of her monuments, commemorative sculptures or grave markers, and that are not portraits and medals or functional works, which have been explored in earlier installments of this webinar series. Instead, it looks, it looks at movable, transferable works, including in this category, her fine output of trophies. Although some of these individual works have been discussed in the context of other themes explored in these webinars, today we'll look at them with fresh eyes in considering them as works that one might have encountered in the context of group exhibitions, for example, where Farnham showed her work regularly. In this class of works belongs the work that you see here, Farnham's stunning 1918 sculpture, Joan of Arc, on display in the exhibit at the Remington Museum. One of the most striking aspects of this sculpture is the way that Farnham manages to present a rich and complex Joan. In the history of representations of this warrior saint, the tendency has been to emphasize either her feminine saintly qualities or her masculine warrior role. And Farnham's Joan is indeed armored like a soldier, but Farnham manages to emphasize too Joan's spiritual force as she casts her gaze heavenward. Her placement beside the huge war horse, with her arm resting on its powerful neck, lends her the power of the horse, even as it emphasizes her diminutive feminine figure. A March 1923 LA Times article interviewing Farnham during a prolonged visit in the area mentions Farnham's Joan of Arc, about which Farnham dryly quips, "They always do her with her arm in the air. I assumed that she had to rest that arm sometime." Farnham exhibited this work at least twice in 1922 in the National Academy of Design's Winter Exhibition and in the annual exhibition of the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. This work, Spanish Dancer, is thought to be Farnham's first studio work and seems to be the sculpture about which a story is told that she brought it to her friend Frederick Remington for evaluation to see if she should continue in her nascent sculptural efforts. Remington is said to have replied, "She's ugly as sin, but full of ginger. Keep it up, Sally." The sculpture is the first of many female dancers Farnham would go on to create. Most of her dancers display a compelling mix of exuberance and absorption, qualities apparent in this first work. Of Spanish Dancer, a 1905 critic wrote, quote, "The spectator does not think so much of a bronze figure as he does of the fact that from the topmost knot of hair to the exaggerated heels of the woman's slippers, he's looking at the incarnation of all that is meant by the title." If Spanish Dancer is exuberant, Farnham explores different emotions in her circa 1915, The End of the Day. This poignant work, representing an exhausted dancer, was created during a time of personal sorrow for Farnham as her divorce from Paulding Farnham was finalized. The smooth, taut lines of the dancer's beautifully muscled, athletic body seem full of subdued energy. Farnham exhibited this work at least 6 times in 1915 to 16. And here's a front view of the same work. I find the hands of the sculpture to be really captivating. There's something just so compelling about them. My eye is drawn to them when I see this front view. Beautifully modeled. Farnham would continue to explore the theme of the female body in dance in her 1921 work, Feather Dancer, which forms the backdrop for the panel in the section of the exhibition exploring Farnham's feminism. Farnham's friend, the celebrated dancer Irene Castle, posed for the work. Other women sculptors of the period also attended to this theme, offering a female rather than male perspective on the female nude. Farnham's many depictions of dancers provide a range of examples for examining the extent to which a woman's perspective on the female nude might differ from the male gaze. A final example of this motif is Farnham's 1925 Marina. Like her other nude female dancers, Marina reflects Farnham's interest in physical development as a source of freedom and empowerment. Marina's robust, athletic form reflects Farnham's own ideals of female beauty and strength. In 1925, Farnham exhibited Marina at the annual exhibition of the National Academy of Design in New York. There are 4 known casts of this work. Farnham's Peter Pan is an interesting case in relation to Farnham's female dancers involving the transsexualism of the Peter Pan figure. As you probably know, from the start, a tradition emerged of women playing the part of the stage character Peter Pan. In its American debut, Maude Adams played the role of Peter Pan. An image of Farnham's Peter Pan appeared in Good Housekeeping in 1906. That's the image you see on the right from Good Housekeeping, which called it, quote, "an expression of a spirit of joy which has come to gladden the world." One of Farnham's important studio works is her 1912 Cave Woman, created in conversation with and as a companion piece to Frederick Remington's Paleolithic Man. Here are the 2 works side by side, Farnham's Cave Woman on the left, Remington's Paleolithic Man on the right. The 2 sculptures share much. They have a similar composition, each crouched figure framed on one side by an upright form, both with one arm and hand dependent, another holding a tool. They each have rough features and ample hair. But Farnham's sculpture upends assumptions that think of our Paleolithic history as a male-driven story. Her cave woman is alert, muscled, and armed, prepared to defend herself. Remington presented our Paleolithic tool-using ancestor as male, holding an oyster in his right hand and a club in his left. But for Farnham, it is the Paleolithic woman who is the tool user. Farnham's Cave Woman is also, I believe, a response to and a feminist critique of French sculptor Emmanuel Frémier's famous, or perhaps infamous, work, Gorille en avant une femme. from which it borrows the rock in hand and certain other details of posture. Fremier's work presents a Darwinian struggle with strong sexual and racial connotations, which were not lost on audiences of his day. To return to Farnham's work, Farnham confronts the motif of sexual assault with an assertion of female strength. Her Cave Woman revisits the themes of Darwinian struggle while upending the sexist narrative that sees women as objects of male aggression and sexual conquest. Her Cave Woman is alert, muscled, and armed, prepared to defend herself. Farnham exhibited this work at the National Academy of Design Winter Exhibition in 1912, and the following year at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts Exhibition, and later at the National Sculpture Society exhibit at the National Watercolor Society annual show in 1918. This review of Farnham's work notes, for in paleoanthropoid's simian-like hand, she grasps a stone, and from the expression of the creature's face, you feel quite sure that she's ready to throw it for the defense of her home, the sake of her political cause, or just to prove that she knows how to throw. The critic closes the review noting, but it is in the expression of the eyes that the sculptress has struck the keynote of the cave woman motif, for in them lies firmness mixed with a little fear, wonder, and self-reliance. I wish that I knew more about this powerful work, the title of which, Little Silver Crucifix, refers to a motif in Rudyard Kipling's grim poem, The Ballad of Fisher's Boarding House. It was exhibited at least once in 1914 at the Gorham Galleries in an exhibition of original sculpture by American women. The work is possibly a response to the brutal war then playing out in Europe. The Kipling poem, ostensibly about the jealousies and passions in a pub, has an international cast of characters, and its sordid violence could be applied to the World War then underway in Europe. Turning now to another category of Farnham's works at large, we'll consider her many equestrian works. Here you see Farnham's sculpture Cowboy Fun as displayed you'll see Farnham's sculpture Cowboy Fun is displayed in the exhibit here at the Remington Museum. This casting belonged to the Remingtons, and like several of Farnham's Western equestrian works, is in direct conversation with Remington's work. Here's a closer look at the sculpture as you see it in the exhibit. This casting has been at the museum since the time of Eva Remington's founding bequest. It's unknown whether Remington purchased this sculpture from Farnham or if she gave it to him in gratitude for his encouragement and guidance. The playfulness and grace of Cowboy Fun are notable and are a persistent theme in her cowboy sculptures. Farnham sculpted several bronco-busting figures in the course of her career. Here we see her 1925 Sunfisher. The almost casual acrobatic posture of Farnham's rider complements the twists and curves of her bronco. Notice the way that the cowboy's right leg is thrown forward over the horse's shoulder, his body leaning hard to the right as the horse twists left. The entire sculpture is balanced with a single leg of the horse touching the ground. Another Farnham Bronco buster is Scratchin'em, also dated to 1925, and also known by the alternate title, Ride 'em Cowboy. Farnham's energetic work captures the athleticism and focus of both horse and rider. Her cowboy sculptures share with Remington's an intimate familiarity with horses and riding, conveying a visceral sense of the communication between horse and rider, the physicality, energy, and balance of the dynamic interaction between them. Those of you who've been participating in these webinars know that Farnham was an avid and highly skilled horsewoman who rode almost every day. Farnham considered this work, her 1930 sculpture Payday, an homage to Remington's Coming Through the Rye, to be one of her good works. Here is Remington's 1902 group Coming Through the Rye, which seems the direct inspiration for Farnham's Payday. This 1930 brochure for Farnham's sculpture Payday explicitly places her work in relation to Remington's. And, you know, it sort of tells the story of the relationship between the two. It recaps that story that I just mentioned about her sharing Spanish Dancer with him and his response that it's ugly as hell, but full of ginger. But definitely the glowing remarks attest to just how convincing were her portrayals of cowboys and riding to those who love the genre. Payday was exhibited at the 1938 National Academy of Design exhibition. There were apparently plans to execute the sculpture in monumental scale in Los Angeles, but the project never materialized. Farnham copyrighted and sold as independent works each of the 4 equestrian figures in Payday. So I don't know if you noticed that on the brochure back here. You know, you would pay $3,500 for the group, but you could purchase a single figure for $1,000. Given the really strong character of each of the individual figures, it's a mystery to me why she didn't cast, exhibit, and market the separate figures more aggressively during her career. They're really quite striking, each as an independent figure. This spirited work, originally modeled in 1923, was owned by the Whitney Museum and included at that museum's inaugural exhibition and catalog in 1931. So the work is alternately known as Brian and sometimes Brian Beru. But in early December of 1939, Farnham participated in what would be her last exhibition, a group show entitled The Horse and Art. The exhibit and sale benefited the work of the French and American Association for the Relief of War Sufferers and was organized by Karl Freund, the noted German-American cinematographer. Farnham exhibited 4 works in that exhibit, Brian, pictured above, as well as her Will Rogers portrait, Sunfisher, and Ride 'em Cowboy, which we've already seen. Turning next to Farnham's work in the area of trophies, her first known trophy commission was in 1904 for the Great Neck Steeplechase Cup, pictured on the screen here. And it's a truly exceptional trophy in my estimation, showing real vision in its use of the jumping horses as the figured handles of the cup. And in these 2 different photographs of the maquette, you can see that she remodeled those figures. They're different in the photo on the left from the photo on the right. Farnham would go on to design other trophies, including the US Open Polo Cup, the Thousand Islands Championship Trophy, and her last known work, the elegant and expressive Warren E. Eaton Memorial Soaring Trophy, all of which we'll turn to. Farnham's 1904 Steeplechase Cup gained some critical acclaim, as seen in this February 26, 1905 clipping from the New York Times, which included an image of the trophy. One critic considered it to be, quote, one of the most artistic pieces of its kind ever produced, end quote. The silver trophy was given to the winner of the Great Neck Amateur Steeplechase, sponsored by the Great Neck Steeplechase Association. The first winner of the trophy was W.R. Grace, the former mayor of New York City. The current location of the work, however, is unknown. Farnham's 1910 US Open Polo Championship trophy shows elaborate use of the bas-relief work that she'd been engaged with during the first decade of the 20th century. The Open is the United States Polo Association's oldest continuously played tournament, and the trophy is still given as the top prize today. We have no information about this work, but it's possible that it is the, quote, very graceful cup, end quote, designed by Farnham that is referred to in a 1910 New York Times article about newly created trophies offered for a range of Thousand Island Yacht Club races. Here's another view of that same unknown work. But here we see another contender for the identity of the very graceful cup referred to in that article. So these images are from the McMahon Family Archive, representing Farnham's photos, correspondence, and other ephemera that have been preserved by her family and are now in the keeping of her great-grandchildren. In the image on the left, you can just make out a date in the medallion on the front of the trophy, and it seems to read 1894. And if that's referring to the date when the trophy was created and first awarded, then it would be too early for the trophy to be Sally James Farnham's work and could instead be the work of her husband, Paulding Farnham, who also designed trophies. If, however, the date of 1894 refers to the date of the founding of the Yacht Club, then the trophy could be one of her designs and could be the one referred to in the article. I'm continuing to investigate the founding date for the Thousand Island Yacht Club. But Farnham was commissioned by the Thousand Island Yacht Club yet again in 1916 to create this trophy. And it can be found today on display in nearby Clayton, New York at the Antique Boat Museum. And incidentally, this trophy was included in an exhibition of work by women sculptors held at the Plastics Club in Philadelphia in 1916. And that was also the first year that the cup was awarded. Farnham's 1939 Warren E. Eaton Memorial Soaring Trophy is her last known work. The trophy is perpetually awarded each year to a person who has made an outstanding contribution to the art, sport, or science of soaring flight in the United States. The bas-relief of this elegant trophy depicts clouds above which Eaton's plane, Falcon, can be seen soaring. Another category of Farnham's works at large consists of her animal sculptures, including this one, her 1921 Spring in the Jungle, also known as The Courtship of Two Elephants. Here you see two different views of the work as it appears in the exhibit at the Remington Museum. The work playfully reduces the size of the enormous elephants to a diminutive 4 by 5 by 3.5 inches, small enough to be held in a single hand. Farnham exhibited this work in 1922 at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts exhibition under the title Spring in the Jungle. The work was cast repeatedly through the 1920s, and it's her work that most often comes up for auction in today's market because there were a number of them produced. Images of this unknown work were shared with Michael Reed in his capacity as the researcher behind the Farnham Catalog Resonate project. According to Reed, the bronze dog is signed S.J. Farnham and is marked by the Cellini Bronze Works Foundry, which dates the work to around 1930. The catalog for Farnham's 1943 estate sale lists a French bulldog and a Pekingese, both bronzes unaccounted for today, but it's possible that this is the Pekingese. I'll let the dog experts in the crowd here weigh in as to whether you think this is a Pekingese. Records show that the Roman Bronze Works Foundry billed Farnham in 1923 to cast, box, and ship this sculpture to Los Angeles. To whom it was delivered and its current location is unknown. This plaster model was sold at Farnham's estate sale in 1943 as, quote, an outstanding piece of modern animal sculpture, unquote. It's unknown whether the work was ever cast in bronze. As we wrap up, I turn to Farnham's 1928 centaur, seen here as a clay model. The work appears in numerous photos of Farnham's studio and twice in the Christmas cards created by her cousin, fellow artist Charles Shepard Chapman. To me, this work has a more explicitly erotic element than other works by Farnham, with the sexualized figure of the centaur seeming to kiss the neck of the woman as his arms wrap just below her breast, lifting them to view. Farnham modeled this work in a number of different sizes. 4 known versions exist in private collections, though the location of the largest version is currently unknown. The last work to consider today is related to Farnham's centaur in the sense of being a mythological hybrid animal figure. The circa 1901 Pegasus, one of the first known works created by Farnham, is seen here as it is displayed in the exhibit at the Remington Museum. Like Spring in the Jungle, Pegasus is a small work, but it has a gestural force and mass that imbues the sculpture with energy and character while losing none of the wonder associated with a winged horse. Farnham exhibited the work at the Art Institute, now Joslin Art Museum, in Omaha, Nebraska, in January of 1931. Charles Shepard Chapman's design for Farnham's 1927 Christmas card features Pegasus. And it seems that the sculpture had special significance for Farnham and her children, since correspondence indicates that they considered it using an image of the work as her grave marker. But in the end, Farnham's grave was embellished with a simple Celtic cross and a quote from Shakespeare's A Winter's Tale, "A merry heart goes all the day." I hope that these webinars have managed to convey just how fitting this epitaph is for a woman artist whose energy, optimism, generosity, and good humor are reflected in her impressive body of work and seem to have affected all who came into contact with her. Farnham died on April 28th of 1943 at the age of 73. And she's buried in the family plot at All Saints Episcopal Church Cemetery in Great Neck, New York. So I would now love to open things up for whatever comments and questions that you have. As always, I'm happy to go back to any of the images from the slideshow if you want to talk about them or comment on them. That's always a lot of fun to look closely at the images with you and hear what you have to say about them. So yeah, if anybody has questions or comments. Oh, I see it. We've got a comment from Carolyn Worth, who said she's especially glad to see Feather Dancer with 2 feathers, because you may have noted that I can actually share the screen again, that one of the images that we have that's actually the best quality photograph of the piece shows Feather Dancer with the second feather broken, so that here, if you see the image on the right, which Michael Reed, and maybe he can say a little bit more about the particular auction. I think he found the image on auction, shows both sets of feathers and the way that they were, they so gracefully swoop across the front of the image here. It's a really lovely design that we miss out on in these other images. Any other comments or questions? It's your last chance, last installment of the webinar. Though I hope that if you haven't already, you'll come on over and view the exhibit in person, because there's nothing like being in communication with the original work of art rather than a digital reproduction of it. Great question from Carolyn Worth. Do we know who were the models for her cowboy work? Perhaps cowboys in British Columbia? That's a great question. I've seen a couple of photos of Sally herself posing in some unusual positions on horseback, but I haven't actually encountered, say, photos of cowboys from the archive, but I know that perhaps Michael Reed has some information, since he has really had the opportunity to dive into the archive in a way that I have not. Michael, do you know of anything about her models?
Hi, yeah, I don't think we know the identity of any of those models.
Okay.
And a lot of early articles sort of set them up as British Columbia based.
Mm-hmm.
But in all honesty, they weren't made till the mid-20s. And
Right.
by that time, she still had ownership of property in British Columbia, but she hadn't visited really since the 1901, 1902.
Right.
So I don't think there's a link there.
We certainly go on. Yeah.
No, I'm just saying, I don't think there's a link. I think, yeah, all of that sort of reference to the cowboy work and the Dude Ranch in British Columbia are 2 completely separate things, just because of timing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it certainly seems to be the case that we can see that she worked from photographs in a number of instances. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were photographic models for some of these works, but I have no evidence to support that supposition, other than seeing that she had done some of her work using photos. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, so Janet asks, will the series be available at the website for the foreseeable future? Yes, we intend this to be an online resource for people interested in Farnham and her work into the foreseeable future. So you can reliably go there anytime you want a fix of Farnham and her work. Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I have really been so happy for your presence here through this series, and I look forward to continuing conversations about Farnham and her work. So be well, happy holidays, and I hope that 2022 gets off to a great start for you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.